Welcome to today's episode of the Medical Device Marketing Podcast. So in the last episode, we spoke to Jacqueline Van Druyten and Cecil Wood about all the documents that we need to know as medical device marketers when it comes to regulatory. And that was really looking up until the point when we get regulatory approval. So in this podcast, we're going to talk about everything we need to know about post-regulatory approval. So what are the things that we as marketers need to know to be able to do a better job every day? Welcome, Jacqueline and Cecil.
Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you for having us.
You're most welcome. So as a quick introduction, can I just ask you to really quickly introduce yourselves again for anybody who didn't listen to the last episode of the podcast? Cecil, can I start with you?
Yes, I'm Cecil Wood. I represent CW Healthcare experts, and we offer the service, business development consultancy, to help medtech get a footprint in the UK initially and get access to the market, and then get them evidence, build their value proposition, and help their business case, and then get more evidence if they want more development, and ultimately get them to the market, often through the NHS, but that's for the UK, but I'm also helping other companies to get that same kind of support in other countries.
And it's getting to the market in a really compliant way,
Exactly.
so that they get the best outcomes from their devices when they're used in the market.
That's essentially it.
Amazing. Jackie, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
So I'm Jacqueline Van Druyten. I'm from Clinar Plus. So we are clinical regulatory consultancy. What we do is we help with compiling actually all the paperwork. So it's all the regulatory compliance paperwork. It's compiling your technical documents and then post-market to help ensure that you're aligned and the paperwork and reports that you need to compile year in and year out to maintain your CE marking.
Amazing. Okay, so in this episode, I really want to talk about everything that we need to know from a regulatory perspective post-market. So in the previous episode, in case anybody hasn't listened to it already, we spoke about all the different documents in the regulatory landscape that we as marketers either need to know about or just really be aware about, but also how they can help us do a better job as medical device marketers. So as soon as we've got regulatory approval for our device and it's ready to go on the market, what are the things that we need to think about from marketers to understand how regulatory are thinking? What are the next steps, Jackie?
So you're entering in a phase that is called post-market surveillance. And what is really important to understand, it's this ongoing monitoring. Before the regulatory approval, you make a lot of promises. Back it up with some data, but it's not real market data, or as Cecil would say, real world evidence. So post-market, you need to keep on monitoring. So this whole quality management system that you have built needs to be geared up to continuously bring in this data from, whether the distribution is working, the feedback that you are getting from your partners, the feedback that you're getting from your users, and how to deal with complaints. And this is what is called post-market surveillance.
And so how might you receive that information, just purely as information for our audience? Like, how would you get that information in?
So one of the things that we're trying to uphold, so this whole post-market surveillance system is part of your quality management system. So the quality management is always looming across it, but you're just in the post-market phase. And in your quality management system, there will be processes that continuously give feedback. So one of the processes is just with your sales and your business development team. They will continuously tell you, because the markets change, they'll continuously tell you, all the complaints you've received. And the complaints will not just be your end users or the patients, it will also be your distribution partners. So keeping all of them in line. So there will be constant complaints coming through your system. And this system, before you even get CE mark, the system needs to be well underway and well planned. You will not get CE mark in Europe if you don't have this post-market system in play, and it's not what the regulators expect. So you'll get it as complaints, but there's certain plans that you've put in. So product specifically, you will have a post-market plan for that product, and then under that post-market plan, you have what we call a post-market clinical follow-up plan. The post-market plan is everything in the kitchen sink. Post-market clinical follow-up focuses on the clinical data. This clinical data can, and this is where there's a bit of confusion. It's not just clinical investigations. You can opt to do clinical investigations. Let's say you've decided, look, I want to be in the market. I want to claim a lot of things, but I don't have all the data. So I'm going to go for low-lying fruit, things that we know we have in the bag. And post-market, we're going to start gathering more data to add more claims or intended users or intended purposes, different populations we want to work on. So you will have these clinical studies that you will in the post-market phase, because you don't need clearance for the device because it's CE cleared. You can go and gather that information.
So the post-market surveillance actually serves two purposes. So not only is it to prove your safety and efficacy once you're in the market with real-world data, if you like, but it's also to expand indications.
And I think it's very important for marketers to see it in this way. I think often post-market surveillance is seen as such a burden. Why should we do it?
Yeah.
Additional trend reporting. Why? It's a great opportunity that your auditors are going to come in any case.
Yeah.
You can start saying, it's performing as safe as we said it would.
Yeah.
The performance is consistent, maybe even better than we thought. And our clinical data is starting to come in. It's not statistically significant, but we just want to let you know we're about 10 patients off a new indication. And you can, in advance, secure a reassessment just on that indication. So it really should be seen as an opportunity post-market to actually live out the potential of the device.
So what happens if, because this is a conversation we had before that I was really interested in, what happens if you do your post-market surveillance, because this has implications around everything, you do your post-market surveillance and actually you're finding you're getting more adverse events than what were reported in your original documentation. Talk to me a bit more about that.
You have to change your documentation.
So your adverse events that you're now reporting in your IFU, you would potentially have to change that if your post-market surveillance isn't effective enough, which would mean then all the claims you're making, all your marketing materials would potentially have to change.
And the usability that you did around that marketing material will
have to change.
It really flays open the whole technical document.
Yes.
So it will open up your risk management reports because it's now not accurate. So you've estimated your adverse event rates at a lower rate and said that the device is safer than it really is. So now you've got to open that up. And often as a manufacturer, you want to go and look at the device, the design of the device to kind of go, well, if we look at it in comparison to the state of the art and our competitors, they don't have, like we benchmarked it against the adverse event rate and ours is high. We have to do something about it because all of a sudden you're outside of the acceptable benchmark maybe for the state of the art because your safety, your adverse events are higher. So you will have to look at your design to bring that in. We often find it's not the design that's at fault.
Implementation.
The implementation, it's the usability of your training material, it's the usability of your IFU. It's those subtle nuances.
I think this is why I wanted to bring it up, because from a marketer's perspective, it's really important, the post-market surveillance, to keep on top of this for that exact reason. But in fact, it's really what do we do with that information? So hopefully we should never get to this stage. This is not a stage you want to be at. But if you sort of anticipate all these issues you might come up against when you go to market and put them all into your training materials so you know you're not going to get those issues, that's really where we need to be, is what I'm saying. Like it's post-market surveillance, I think, is much more important than we give it credit for from a marketing perspective. It's not just a regulatory thing. In fact, we need to look at this data and say, where can we improve, or how can we improve? Can we improve?
And I think to Lena's saying from golfing is play it as it lies.
Yeah.
Also don't see it as the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like you will go and you'll benchmark data in your state of the art of how much adverse events and things should happen, what the rate of adverse events present. This might be old data under the directive that had underreporting. And your competitors might look safer than they really are, but now they're also under the EU MDRs. So honesty is best to state with, but it's about having this great communication between a team of like, it's not just engineering needs to make a device and business development needs to do the distribution. It's about all communicating and being on the same kind of side and understanding the device. So looking at the adverse events and going, it's not just the engineering to go and fix the design. If you can root cause assess and say it's definitely the design, we have one button that's sticky and it's creating this horrible adverse event, but also be super critical of your training materials and your IFU. Like ask with distributors, have business development go in there and say, can you give me more insight? So there's a whole assessment that happens post-market. And it's to have that robust quality management system for your post-market surveillance that will allow all these stakeholders to play together and get the right information out of the whole spectrum.
And it's actually using it as really great information sources, isn't it? So actually, instead of going, oh no, something's gone wrong. Yes, of course, you wish you had seen it coming up front and you wish you had a plan for it and you wish you had not had this happen. But actually, when it does happen, go, great, how do we solve this? So actually, it's a really great source of information to be able to then, agilely change your device, or not necessarily change the device, but change your training materials, change how you're sending it out into the market so that actually you don't see these issues. So it's a really post-market surveillance, I suppose is what I'm saying, is like a treasure trove of information. Like not only can it help you to expand your clinical, sort of bandwidth, if you like, not bandwidth, that's the wrong term, but expand, what clinical data you have, but it's also to show, where there could be issues and how to quickly resolve them too.
But it also, that team, like distribution can give you great insights. But if you can't articulate the problem well to business development, why must they be involved in risk management? Why do they need to go to the distributors? I don't want to spook my distributors. I don't want to spook my warehousing. It's about, if you've done the training and the risks is well understood by your third-party partners, it's easier to communicate to them.
I mean, when you think about the relationship with the distributor, it's very important, this PMS, because imagine, like you were with the spook then, because if there's a problem with this, imagine that their responsibility is to sell the product, and then they get to hold back, and then the manufacturer is pressuring them to sell, and they get a problem with the device. It's reported, and then it slows down the whole process, and you can't sell. So the relationships are interrelated, and there's impacts on these reports. These reports have effect on the patient, effect on the supply, effect on the selling. It's just like a sort of knock-on effect. It's really important. It's like at the top of the pyramid, as it were, of things that could go wrong. And it's important to share that information and disseminate it. About the PMS.
And what you said is really important, is also to contain it. If it's only a small batch that's affected, or if there's only a small issue with the maintenance in servicing a product, don't spook them with everything else. Clearly communicate to business development before you just
how you solve it.
Yeah, you don't just say, please go and speak to my warehousing. About what? Oh, we had this problem. What exactly is the problem? How do you think it came about? You have to, as a team, be very transparent and open to what you think might have transpired. Because if you put your business development in that situation, they don't want to be accusing the warehouse of anything. They don't want to be saying that there's a problem with the device. So post-market surveillance plan is really important that everybody in your value chain understands it, including your third-party suppliers, and that you have that team collaboration, that if things don't quite exactly go to plan, that you get the correct information to get to the root cause.
So there's a flip point to this. So if you have bad clinical data, as in bad outcomes, not the outcomes you want in your post-market surveillance, then obviously that can have implications that we've just spoken about now. But what happens if you have better outcomes? Because actually your training materials were just amazing. And it's not all about training materials, but your maintenance plans were perfect. That everything was just aligned beautifully. The device was used better than expected in the patients. It gave you better outcomes, less adverse events. If that was a scenario, what impact would that have overall?
That's a claim you can make, because you have the data post-market to back that up. And because the data will be coming in to Udemy, and you can also see under FDA, their recall, their adverse events, you can see how your competitor is doing. That is a claim because the data's out there.
So you can then you would then improve your claims everywhere, would update your CER, you would then be able to make those claims in all your
Lowest
marketing
rates
materials.
of X.
Amazing. So there's a real benefit.
It's like an efficacy, as it were.
Yeah. So there's a real reason to actually work hard with regulatory at all stages. I know we've been saying this earlier, but actually really work together to say, how can we optimize this at every stage once it goes to market? And from a business development point of view as well, how can we get this device perfectly into the market so that the end users use it better than we ever planned?
Can I give you an example of how that could look? If you pre-CE mark, if you're doing the clinical evaluation and you're doing the state of the art and you're seeing the rates at which certain adverse events or device deficiencies, device faults happen, you can also categorize them under, is this a usability fault? And you can create like a master category that to say all of these issues are usability faults. All these adverse events is due to a user misunderstanding or a distribution problem. And you group them all together. Now you have that data points on all of those problems. Post-market, you can put them all together and kind of go, well, what's the rate at which my competitor, these problems occurs versus us? With us, it's 0. Ooh, let's look at the patient outcomes that we so far and the usability feedback that we've gotten from our surveys in our post-market surveillance plan. It's excellent across the board. All of a sudden, you've got all these objective data points that you can say best usability in the market based on consumer surveys and adverse event rates related to usability.
So it's like, because we can never, in medical device, you can never say best, because obviously you need to support it. But actually, if you have that data that you can then support it,
there's your reference.
Yeah.
And you can do this. It's post-market surveillance reports is the gift that keeps on giving.
If you said that to me before.
if you do an excellent PMS plan, and this is where marketers are making a serious mistake when regulatory goes, oh, we just need to finish up the post-market surveillance plan, and everybody just leaves the room. It's the worst time for the product manager to leave the room.
Yeah.
Like your wish list of ambitions, you open up again the clinical development plan and you go, wow, I saw in the state of the art that there's quite a few device problems from our competitors on this, and this. I'd love to make a claim that we have the best usability in market. We know we're going to get this performance data because we have these design features that's in the bag, but it can also be related to usability. How do we plan the post-market surveillance to actually get this outcome? And then, regulatory will be ready. Like, well, we were thinking about a survey, and then you'll look at the survey and the very general questions that we're asking the end users. And that is where marketing can come in and say, no, I actually want specific questions that I want to build this on. And no, actually, I want my marketing agency or my usability agency to look at this from a consumer science point of view of what we really need to ask. Also getting third-party validation for those surveys that we're doing. So it's really the point where, and it doesn't need to be static. What is lovely about the post-market surveillance is, unlike all other areas of the documents where marketing comes to me and says, I want to change a few points of the CER, not going to happen. But your destiny lies with the post-market surveillance plan and your ambition. There you can say, well, in the future, can we do surveys here? What about if with some of our marketing materials, I want to incorporate some of the training materials, can we put a few claims in there? That is where you can build and make it a really exciting brand or product to work with.
So it's about keeping in close communication all the time about what you want to do, because there's always ways of doing it. It's about understanding which channels you can go down to do that.
And you can also get feedback based on the quality of work you're putting in. Is my videos, my training videos working? Is my marketing videos is it clear the message that we are sending, differentiating ourselves in the market? You can just add that to the bag that is the post.
I suppose that's actually an interesting market research angle as well that you can go down to understand, if your training material is working, if your messaging is working and things like that.
If you put it into the post-market surveillance plan, you have to do it. So if you're having problems getting the budget approved, if it's in the PMS plan, the regulator will be on your side saying, when is the surveys going to come in? Like, wasn't it due Q4 of whatever? And you're like, yes, if I had the budget. But now I think it's going to be escalated to top management. And
if it has to be done. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So so that's the post-market surveillance. I say that's the post-market surveillance because it's not just a quick thing, and there's an awful lot involved in it, and it can be really beneficial to marketers to help to boost claims, expand claims, things like that. But there's obviously one other thing, and many marketers who are listening to this podcast may be working with distribution partners to actually get their products to market. So we spoke before a little bit about the distribution plan, but I think it's a lot more complicated, especially from a terminology perspective, than maybe what we give it credit for. So Cecil, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what business development looks like or what distribution plans. I know we spoke a bit about it before, but, what's involved in these and what do marketers need to know about?
I think you need to know about the economic operators, don't you really? Those people.
I think that's really interesting because actually when we initially had our conversation, you two were talking about economic operators, and I have to hold my hands up that actually, although I know all the terms underneath the economic operators, I didn't know them as that group. So I suspect that could be the same for some of our listeners. So who is an economic operator and what do they do? Because there's many of them.
First of all, think number one, the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Who's got all of the data? Who's designed this? Who's made this wonderful, innovation, this medical device, and brought it to the market? Who's got all of those instructions for use? Who's got the CDP? Who's got everything?
Yeah.
It's the manufacturer that produced this thing. But they're not alone. There are also the authorised representative, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to make sure that you're bringing something into the EU and it's got to satisfy the regulations, the MDR. You've got to authorize something for non-EU coming into the EU. The authorised representative. And the
manufacturers on their own can't authorise their own products, so they have to have a authorised representative.
I think they stand separately.
So if the manufacturer's in the US and they want to go to the UK, they have to have an authorised representative in the country. And then if they want to go into Europe, in Europe they've also got an authorised representative. Even in Europe, sometimes certain countries will require actual local authorised representative. You can't just have one for the whole of the EU. So it depends from country to country. So under EU, the authorised representative is these made. It's what Cecil is explaining. All these terms need to be met, but more and more competent authorities, regulators across the world is recognising those terms, because this is the first time that these entities are actually coming under regulation and their activities is being defined to say, when do you qualify to be this term? Not the other way around of like, I identify as a manufacturer.
Thanks, Jackie. And also comes the importer.
Yeah.
They're there to take the drug in, or device. They're a lot in medicines as well, sorry. They device into the country and hold it ready in readiness to pass on to the distributor.
And so to define the importer and the distributor, they can be the same, can they?
The importer
and the distributor, could they be as one?
Confirm this.
Yeah,
yes. Okay. And then I'm missing somebody, the authorized representative, the importer.
Distributor.
The distributor himself. Yeah, I've said this already, but I'm just but I'm saying it again anyway. But distributor is like existing in different forms, as we've said.
Yes.
It can be the traditional form where they're here, the country to sell the drug, and they got to just get it through to the market and customer. And the job can be all encompassing, or it can be in components of what the responsibilities may be in terms of maintenance and the management of the products.
And so the regulatory responsibilities pass from one to the other. So you have the manufacturer who will, as we said, manufacture the device, manage all the documents associated with that device. Then you have the EU representative who says, do all your systems comply with the country you're going into?
Yeah.
So that could be Europe, France, Germany, UK. And then you have the importer who will say, we will follow all your regulations of how to import it correctly.
Yeah, make sure they import from the license. They have the license to import. Yeah.
Make sure they have a license. And then you've got the distributor who could also be the importer.
Yeah.
But then will distribute the device again in accordance with your QMS.
So here's where the problem came in, is regulations decided to say, based on activity, what is your status as an economic operator? And this has gotten everything into a bit of a spin, because previously somebody would have identified as a distributor, and they will have two components come from the manufacturer, and they will assemble and then make the device. If you look at the definition of a manufacturer, if you start assembling, you're suddenly a manufacturer. So even though you want to take on the role of being a distributor, the activity that qualifies that definition under the regulation, it suddenly says, I respect that you identify as a distributor, but you act like a manufacturer. And under that, you need to comply to the manufacturing standard.
So it basically adds a whole lot more complexity onto the distributor if they're then putting anything together within their warehouse.
And this is why Cecil's been so busy with service level agreements, because you have to make all these entities aware of the limitations on the activities that they can and cannot partake in.
Interesting. Okay, so what economic operators, why are they so important? And I know we've just sort of defined each type of economic operator, and I suppose we probably already said this really, but what is the importance? Like, why are these here economic operators?
It depends on their role, I think. If you want your product to go into another country, it's got to be compliant with the regulations. That's important. If you want a good partner, you need a partner to be able to distribute your drug in another country. You need to have the partnership with that and the proper agreements of the responsibilities within that relationship to make the product move along, as it were. And then you've got to know where to import and so on. I think it's the relationships that you need in order to progress your you can't do it alone. The manufacturer cannot go alone. It has to have a partner, and that's what the partnerships are. And it's important to have everything, as Jackie pointed out, outlined in your service level agreement, in that, and that it's meant to be subject to scrutiny and audit, or to make sure it complies with everything. So the language must be comprehensive in the way that you work the relationship to get the product to the market.
Your economic operators is your weakest point of your quality management system, because it's not under your control.
Yes.
So the big thing that, quote unquote, your distribution partners are managing, other than the safety and performance, is something extremely important to the regulations. Any regulator across the world is traceability.
Sure.
Where at any point is your device? The other thing is the distributors are often very good at looking at the local regulatory compliance. We talk often about EU MDR, and we speak about UKCA and the FDA, but often, especially in Europe, there's nuances between countries. And your distributors are often a very good partner to kind of just do the paperwork within that little country. If you take on the paperwork of every single jurisdiction, it becomes overwhelming. And also the regulatory changes in that. So having a partner in those areas is really important, because the regulatory changes, we've never seen so many changes internationally consistently. And that has been with regulation. And if you have somebody standing still and just looking at one country, they can tip you off just to say, look, I don't know if your regulatory intelligence has picked this up, but we've had a big change. We need an extra piece of paperwork.
I think that's really important and really interesting, because we see this in promotion of medical devices as well. So although you have the EU MDR, which is the overriding regulation, you also have all the little country regulations when it comes to how you can and cannot promote a device. And that's purely from a marketing advertising perspective. So I can totally understand that actually the same thing with regulatory. You have all those nuances in each little country as well. So it's really important you have somebody on the ground who understands it, because for us to understand everything from a marketing perspective, and we only deal with one tiny bit in comparison to what you guys do, But actually, it takes us a lot of work to stay on top of what's happening across all the European countries. And if we had all the regulations that you guys have to deal with, it would be nigh on impossible. It'd be very, very difficult. So I can see, the real value of having local partners to deal with that. So this brings me on very well to service level agreements. So you've spoken a bit about service level agreements, but I don't think we've really defined what they are and why they're important, because many marketing managers, hopefully many who'll be watching this as well, will be working with distributors. So they might work for a manufacturer and they're managing distributor agreements, or they're working with a distributor who, has the responsibilities for a manufacturer. So it'd be good to understand a little bit more about what are service level agreements and what's included in them, so that people understand, what we're actually talking about when we talk about this.
A service level agreement is really a document that agreement between two parties whereby there's a supplier and there's the manufacturer, say, and they want them to be able to conduct certain things and according to a scope of service. It's like every agreement that you make.
Yeah.
It's like, these are your responsibilities for this and this and that and that.
So what could be included in it? So can you give me some examples of what people might see in a service level agreement, and particularly things that are relevant to marketers? So what's in there?
Maintenance might be one thing.
Okay.
Maintenance, it might be training requirements.
Okay.
It could be training.
Yeah.
It could be conditions that you store the device in.
Yeah.
It could be instructions on how to use it. It could be one of these things that we talked about that need to be in an agreement to make sure that that partner, that supplier, knows what they're doing when they handle your products.
So it's again just getting it really smoothly down to the market.
Yeah. Any more what's missing in what you say then, Jackie?
And it's just having, and this has been like a recent development, is having regulations really having to be outlined in service level agreements. We spoke about economic operators. So in service level agreements, you have to be very clear what activities your importer can and cannot conduct. So the importer can bring a device in or a component, but they're not allowed to put anything together. They're not allowed to resell to the end user. They're allowed to go and take it to a warehouse or to your local distributor. But other than that, they can't do any activities. So you make sure that all your third-party suppliers in the value chain sticks within the remit that they're identified as. So as the regulatory team, we do an economic operator map. And in that, we want to make sure that the service level agreement makes them very clear that you are importer. At no point are you allowed to assemble, to do any maintenance, to manufacture. You cannot tamper with the UDI, the traceability barcode of the device. All of those restrictions, you want to verbatim for medical legal or any gross legal misconduct, you want to define that you're not found foul. But like I said, your third-party economic operators are your weakest point of your quality management system. If your quality management system as a manufacturer comes into question because of a third party, it doesn't mean it's just a consequence on one of your products. It's all your products are now under question. Your quality management is what holds everything up. So it can't be more serious to make sure that you've got it very clearly aligned. And also, if you have in your contracts clear contractual terms of what they can and cannot do, there's a clear legal line of misconduct. If you're going to write a service level agreement that's fluid, your legal routes are going to be tedious, expensive, time-consuming, and there's no wins with that. We're seeing definitely with the traditional distributor models that they're really struggling under the new terms for economic operators.
In what way?
Well, I think not knowing what they are under the regulations, what their responsibility is, and what they have to stick by, and that if they don't, it can have a big impact on the relationship and on the probity of the product. When they do, they do something outside of their scope.
Yeah. So is it that the service level agreements are not clear enough at the moment?
And also awareness of being an economic operator. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
There was a device that had a fuse that had to be replaced. The manufacturer on the maintenance plan, the fuse being replaced wasn't within a maintenance plan because it was within a component that needed to be changed every 2 years. But this particular fuse, it was just the fuse that had gone faulty. So the distributor, which also had, so in the distribution agreement, you can have many components. You can have a maintenance plan. You can even have a sales team. You can have a team that does the training. You can have a team that actually assembles the device or assembles it on site, like with surgical theaters. And in this case, we had a distributor that wasn't doing any maintenance, just changed the fuse on that device. And what immediately happens is that device, because it's not defined in the maintenance plan, that fuse gets changed. It was the whole component needs to be changed. The whole device is a non-CE mark device immediately. So the CE marking that device falls away because the EU MDR identifies it as a tampered device. So you lose your CE mark immediately.
Oh, wow.
But the distributor now became a manufacturer, and they didn't have the CE marking, the quality management system that could support that.
Yeah.
So immediately they were in foul of putting a medical device within circulation that was not cleared.
So what you're telling me is the SLAs are extremely important to get them correct, because otherwise people fall foul of certain regulations and they become what they don't want to become, which then causes regulatory issues.
And legal issues.
And legal issues as well. Yes.
It could damage the integrity of the products.
Yeah.
And then it's going to cost a lot of money to restore that, you know.
So this is really important then. Actually, if you're looking at distribution agreements or SLAs, it's really important to do this early on in your development journey to actually understand what issues you could come up against, but making sure that it's very clearly defined how this is going to work through the distribution channel.
I would have to agree, yes.
And is this, so the EU MDR hasn't been in place for a very long time. Are you seeing changes coming then because of this?
Think about it. At this point in time, we are all worrying just to get CE marked.
Yes.
Post-market, we're not worried about. And definitely the checking of your economic operators, because if you've got a CE mark and you've mapped out your economic operators also get separately audited for your product as part of your quality management process. So they will come and get audits just based on that device. And that hadn't happened before. And now that bottleneck of everybody getting their CE mark is happening, and we're seeing more and more feedback of economic operators are not defined in the manufacturer's technical documents. Oh, we went to the distributor. Where's the training materials? The maintenance plan wasn't clear. Oh, we were seeing maintenance or changes to devices and this is where the fuse issue came out. It wasn't an audit. It's like changing of the fuse is not defined in the maintenance plan. So this is now off scope. Also, there was problems with the labeling in one manufacturer where the UDI label didn't, its printability and its visibility, it wasn't very high quality labels. So you couldn't see the label anymore. And based on that, they had to recall. And then the distributor decided, no, they will just remove the labels and put new. You're not allowed to do that. That's not under the remit of a distributor. You cannot do that. Only the manufacturer can.
So from a marketing perspective, I think this is very regulatory-led ground.
Yes.
But I think it's very good that people understand, you know, what you can and can't do in the background, and that you do have service level agreements, and there is a lot of information included in them about what's expected from your partners in order to distribute your product to the end user.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to understand. There are other interesting things in service level agreements, things like time to market or time that you have to ship the product. You can have things like that as well, kind of from a brand perspective. So it actually protects your brand, you know. So if you are distributing for a certain company And, you want to make sure that as soon as somebody places an order, they do get their device within 48 hours or 24 hours, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the scheduling and there's logistics and all that as well that can be incorporated in the agreements, of course.
Yeah. So it's a pretty broad document. There's many things that can be in there.
But it's also, when we look at, again, falling foul of the regulations and looking at your core external documents, like your IFU, your training, etc., you need to make sure that your distributor doesn't have their own marketing teams and they change any of those materials that it doesn't quite say the same claims as what you've originally stated. So a lot of the classic distribution models might have extra features, like you can get their sales team, get their marketing team to do things locally for you. All these things you've got to iron out and make sure that they don't go off script or off the technical documents and don't say things that you can't say about the device. So those are, and I think the thing that we're seeing a big change with is the services that was offered in the what I would want to call a classic distributor agreement. It's getting very hard to maintain this all-encompassing package.
And when you say all-encompassing, you mean bringing the product into the UK, you mean UK and Europe, so storage and selling of the device.
Logistics, import, storage, selling, marketing, training of your users, marketing to your users. So often with distributors, they will have one medical liaison or salesperson that will sell 50 products. And we're finding that is really difficult to maintain because not just because of the regulation, but some of the devices are becoming extremely technical. So it's not possible for one salesperson to know 50 different product categories unless they an expert. Maybe you've got a distributor that is a master in robotics. Obviously, there's transferable skills that their sales team will have. But often we find it's a mishmash of products that they, how can I say, they, what do you call it?
So they have a broad portfolio.
Yes.
Yeah, across different therapy areas, across different specialities.
Because it might be a small country.
Yeah. Yeah. So then the risk with that is, of course, the training could not be there. So you might not have as high quality training as you would like, which means then you have issues with regulatory.
Under your quality management system and HR, you require a person with certain qualifications and skills, but that distributor, for what they're distributing, the other products don't have the same skills.
So how's it changing? So you said you're seeing challenges with the distribution model or the current distribution model as it is. How are you seeing it changing? Or is it changing?
Some of the things we've seen in robotics.
Yeah, the robotics is an area that we've talked about already. And in that we're talking about, hey, you get a surgical robot on the market, and we have to consider it in a different way than normal because it is made of multiple parts that are not actually a manufactured device, a CE mark device.
It's imported
until it's actually manufactured. So it's imported as components.
Yes.
And they can go to all your, on the one hand, what kind of distribution method are you using? Are you using a distributor that might have all singing and dancing, as I said? Or is it that you go to like warehouses, these warehouses or third-party logistic providers that can hold the components in the right conditions
and they
then pass them on?
Because they don't have to be medical certified because these are components. Exactly. They're not medical devices.
Exactly. They're just
because they haven't been put together yet.
Yes.
So that's interesting. So then you're changing the classification of what you're shipping depending on if they're constructed together or not yet.
So your importer doesn't need to meet the definition of the EU MDR importer, but they are doing that thing because they're not importing a medical device.
Yeah.
But the team that actually goes and assembles it in the theater, the robot, all of a sudden the requirements of the individuals doing that, the engineers putting that together, and the validation and the quality management system.
They're now manufacturer.
Yeah, it's up to the quality of the manufacturer.
It's a minefield, isn't it? It's a minefield, all the different terms, and actually making sure you don't fall into the wrong classification.
Yes.
Depending on what device you're distributing.
But can you see it's not coming from, in this example, it's not coming from the regulators. It's coming from the technology that is advancing at incredible pace. And this is what we are seeing with distribution, is you've got to look at the unique properties of the medical device and what it needs to get it to market. Looking at this all singing, dancing distribution model, it's no longer working. It's for your high turnaround consumables, but it's definitely not for the novel tech that's coming.
Yeah. So there's different things need to be considered depending on how the device is put together.
It's high value as well. You think about it, and then there's relationships that you can have with like fulfillment companies, of course, as well, where they may be just used to like pick and place. They're called pick and place with their robots, and they have robots in their warehouses sometimes that pick and place the product, and just like with Amazon, and just pick and place it. And so some devices actually might suit that rather than the traditional distributor model that we were talking about, the original one. And yet there's such a markup for when you want to sell on to the end customer. Why not doing it in a different way? So there are different ways of going about it.
So you're seeing new things coming in.
It's changing,
So it could be really beneficial to manufacturers as well, depending on the device. Totally dependent on the device. It's not suitable for all. It's just there's new devices, new technologies coming in, and actually it's looking at each one and saying what's best for that versus the same as always.
And this is where I'd encourage legacy devices to relook their service level agreement and their third-party providers under the new regulation, because there's real opportunities. Cecil's example was great in looking at this pick and place products. Like there's a lot of products that have very expensive distribution agreements, and there's actually newer logistics and warehousing models that suit them perfectly fine.
Amazing.
And it's more cost effective. And I mean, that kind of cost reduction can be passed over to consumers, which I think is really positive. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's like I think this is where marketers have such an important role. If they have the overview, and I think nobody is the best custodian as the product manager to look after the product life cycle of a device. It's the only person that cares about that narrative. And if you can look at it from a broad perspective, you should be challenging the distribution model, or you should be challenging what clinical data or post-market surveillance surveys, because you're the custodian of the lifetime of this product. You know, is this a teenage product? Is this a geriatric product that is on its way out? How do we help just, put it out to better pastures? Like, and you're the person that needs to change it. But business development will stay sturdy, and service level agreements works for us. We've never had problems, and regulatory would be like, and mess with the quality management system. Like, it's worked for us for 5 years. The marketer must challenge that.
It must be really, say, difficult to pull away from the normal approach, because if you got somebody who says like, I want to go into the market, okay, and I've got 100 products I want to sell, just 100, and say to you, I'll buy them off you for a markup, and I'm going to guarantee selling them to you, to the customer. You probably say like, oh, let's go with the traditional role because I really want my product sold on.
It's understood.
It's sold already. But if they let you down, the distributor, then you've got a problem, because you say like, you're not selling as many as you thought you were. You told me you were going to sell, and then you have a problem. So it's worth rattling the cage a bit. It's worth disrupting if you can, because there are probably better solutions if people are not too scared of the market they're trying to get into.
And I suppose it's actually working with people who understand the system to actually understand how you can change it.
There's also a few cautionary tales that we are seeing, and that is exiting your classic distributor agreement. There might be a severance fee. Then people will say, if you leave us prematurely, we had a 5-year commitment from you. So you will pay us at least the 5 years of profits that we didn't make. So I think the product manager it's very important for the product manager to be involved, because they have that foresight of the product life cycle.
And that brings me to another point that we didn't mention in the SLA, in that you should also have penalties in there, and remedies to solutions and escalation solutions And that's
yes,
all
of course.
what to do if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
So that falls into that line as well.
Yeah.
So, and talking about things going wrong is unfortunately the regulators also hot on this. So during COVID time, there was product shortages and we saw a lot of litigation happening. And this led to the invention of shortage lists. And it required pharmaceutical companies to actually scope out like when a shortage would occur and what the impact on public health, if any. And if there is a severe impact on public health, you had to quantify how big the problem would be. So if you have had a product to diabetic patients and your insulin pump, one component is out of stock, how many diabetic patients would be affected? What is the risk to them? Do we have more ketoacidosis? All those kind of things you had to quantify. It's now regulation for medical devices. So we know already it's in the US, but EU MDR has recently updated medical device shortages that if you foresee shortages of your device, you must be able to quantify, and this is part of your risk management process and your post-market process. You need to quantify what the impact is on patients, and you have to give them some kind of plan. And the penalties are severe. Like they're talking about embargoes against you as a manufacturer. So all the marketing work you've done, all the getting the distributor and the service and the usability, all of that could be destroyed in one foul sweep because let's say one of your components go out of stock and for 3 months you can't get that stock and now you've dominated the market because everybody loves you and patients are harmed. So you have to have all of that paperwork already ready if you foresee that we're going to have a stock.
But this is for the manufacturer, not necessarily an SLA consideration.
No, it is.
Okay.
Because think about your service level agreement. There's profits to be made. So your distributor, you promise them for that warehousing space and for their sales team, they're going to make X amount of profits a month selling X amount of things. So it's a double whammy for the manufacturer. It's firstly, you're not going to get any sales, plus your distributor, as per the old distribution agreements, it's going to say, hold on, we had an agreement, and if you had any stock shortages, then you should have told us, and you know that we have penalties that you will cover our costs for this period in time until
they've had loss of business now because of them, so they're going to get
difficult world.
Service level agreements are not for the faint-hearted, and
So you need to get them right. Is what we're hearing here.
And also, the distributor wouldn't want to embargo against them.
No,
they're just like, I'm not the manufacturer.
It needs to be good on all sides.
Yeah. So, but they are liable.
Okay.
And this is what your service level agreement has to put that bit of regulation of what is their role and responsibility.
And sometimes it's not good having a monopoly either. Okay, you can see the disadvantage in having a monopoly because then you are responsible to all of those patients that when there's a shortage, you are liable because you're not covering them like you said you would. So,
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
So the distribution, logistics, business development world is becoming more and more complex because of liability.
So we've gone through the entire product life cycle when it comes to regulatory. So what are the things that marketers need to know? What are the documents they need to know before it comes to market? And then what things they need to think about? So post-market surveillance, SLAs, things like that after market. Is there anything we've missed out on that you think marketers should be aware of in terms of regulatory?
Free information.
Tell me more. What do you mean by that?
So the exciting stuff is we now need to trend report on the adverse events and the data and how the device is doing. So this is a point of information. If your CERs are not coming out on time and you have to wait every 5 years for your clinical affairs team to update that, you can always badger marketing. So you can go to marketing and you're like, is my post-market safety update report ready? So it's your post-market.
You mean marketing can come to you?
Yes, unfortunately, they can come to us.
Not the other way around. You're not coming to us. We're coming to you.
We want data. It's the same thing with your surveys.
Yes.
You will say, like, is any of the surveys, can I have the safety and complaints trends? Can I have all these kind of... So definitely...
It's a great source of information for like, what should we be doing in marketing? Like there's so many things you can do, but actually getting information from the horse's mouth, which is really what it is, isn't it, from regulatory, you can then see actually, do we have any problems? Do we need to plan for anything? Is there anything coming over the horizon? I mean, you really should be our best friends.
And if you're being really sneaky, and you get your fit in with a post-market surveillance plan, you can say that you annually want a vigilance report on all the competitors. So you don't need to wait until the SOTA is updated every 5 years. You can say every year you want to also know how your competitors is doing against adverse events and device problems.
And how easy is that to put together for your regulatory team?
It shouldn't take more than a week.
And would they potentially just say, no, we've got many other things to do? Thank you very much, marketing.
The regulators won't allow them.
So the regulators have to say you have to do it. So you have to do that anyway.
So you, after Christmas, you come back in the new year and you ask a regulatory, so when are we doing the post-market safety update reports? But we have to do the vigilance report first. So when will that be out? And you just put that in the calendar. You send a friendly reminder to regulatory. I'm really looking forward to reading these reports. So there will be ongoing sources of trend reporting and information that marketing should be earmarking in their calendar. And
Amazing. Cecil, is there anything else that you would say marketing should be aware of about business development or regulatory side of things?
I think when you think of regulatory, but think of also business development. Think about the product going to the market. Think of all the economic operators involved. And you asked earlier on, about the business plan, or the distribution plan. It's a plan that involves a lot of parts, not just the distributor, or it can be other economic operators, and they've all got agreements, right? Thinking about the SLA, that make it all work together to deliver, information, and then to remedy problems that coming back at you. It's like, think of it as more holistic indeed.
So the distribution plan is not just about the end distributor. It's about
economic. It's the other plan. You've all got agreements that are there as a supplier. You've got an agreement, and that's telling you exactly how I want the relationship to work. So I think you need to be mindful of that.
How big is a distribution plan? I'm just thinking, if I was like, that sounds like it's got some quite good information. If I worked with distributors all the time.
Are we talking about robotics?
Let's say so. But if I was if I thought I'm really interested to actually find out how this whole process works, like how big? Because if I said like a technical file, no, don't go near it. It's like a whole table full of documents. But like a distribution plan, like how big is that sort of document?
Think of it as a separate agreements. The service level agreements will be putting into practice what you want, saying what's the minimum. They may reference something else, but that's what's making your relationship happen with the supplier. So think of that. Think about how you're covering yourself with all of those different players, and then those economic players, and then you'll get a better outcome. Because you've got everything in there. We said you've got also escalation, you've got remedies, you've got penalties. You've got, this is what you do, in there. It's outlined.
You guys really do have all the information, I have to say. You have all the information.
The SLAs are lengthy. The distribution plan, so this is section 3 of the technical document. We can literally get everything in one page, but we hyperlink for each and every, and we call it an economic operator map. So we just map out everybody. But as soon as you start clicking on the hyperlinks
it goes
of the service level agreements, you're just like, Cecil, this hyperlink is not working. You're like, it's being updated. I'm having an audit. I have to have a functional link. Can you give me an initial draft, please? So it's, yes, that could be really simple, but the science is in the SLAs. That is extremely important, and that should not be rushed. Because if you have any problems with stock shortages and everybody coming to you for money, that is going to save the bacon at the end of the day.
It's like really everything we've been talking about regulatory in general, but it's like get everything planned correctly up front to avoid all the issues later down the road. But it's the same, it sounds like exactly the same with the SLAs. Make sure they're really well thought out so that every part is mapped out so you don't have any issues. Everybody knows exactly what's expected of them down the road.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So thank you both for attending today's podcast. Is there anything else you would leave the listeners with? Or have we talked about everything?
I think we did. Under distribution, I think this is a very good taster for marketers to get their feelers in the right place.
Only it has to be a good discussion that even goes in early to the board level so that they know what the outcomes are going to be if they don't do the right action. Take action early and feed it back to the management so they know what's going to happen, and then prepare for it and find the remedies to get your product on the market.
Amazing. And just identify all the issues that could happen. And then
the report.
Amazing. Lovely. Well, I hope everyone's enjoyed watching or listening to this episode of the Medical Device Marketing Podcast, and you have a little bit more of an understanding around everything to do with regulatory. But I think the resounding message that comes out of this podcast is we need to start early, but also regulatory really is your best friend. They have so much information that can help you to do a better job every day. Have a fantastic day, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Medical Device Marketing Podcast.